All right, so welcome to the Well Actually podcast. I'm joined by a very special guest.
Hi everyone, my name is Joy. I am a lifestyle blogger and an apartment speaker.
All right, so she's here to, chop it up with us and, maybe help us if you're interested in getting into any sort of online or even public speaking. So if you have any new endeavor that requires an online presence, she's going to try and help us get things going. All right, but first, we want to talk about some of the things that have been in the news lately. And I don't know if you've noticed, but lately it's been a lot of missing posters of people going missing or attempted abductions. And I don't know if it's something that's sort of like a new phenomenon or it's just like we're just being made aware of it more. And I just want to get your thoughts on that. Like, have you seen much of this?
Yeah, so it's crazy. It's really scary, and especially as a woman of color, it's one of those things like now I'm very mindful of where I park my car, especially when I'm walking, just inside the house at night. I'm like looking around, even before keying in. I think with human trafficking has been always high, but I think it's just heightened up a little bit more. And I mean, we know that human trafficking is real, especially when it comes down to in various countries. But I think what's happening now is that the media has now made attention to it, and media, but I'm not talking about mainstream media. I think our cultural media, because I think there is not as much urgency when it comes down to missing women of color. Right. And I think just since we are the ones that's kind of speaking out about it, now there's more attention to it. And I remember hearing somebody mention that an abductor that was caught, he actually admitted that the reason why he targets women of color is that because when a woman of color is missing, there is nothing going on, just there's no media attention to it, right? So when you look at the trends, if it's a missing white girl, Amber Alerts and all of these things, she ends up making all of the headlines in the news. But when it's a black girl missing, it's nothing. So I think that the lack of value when it comes down to black people, I mean, it's sad, but I mean, I think now we've kind of been like, listen, if this is happening in our community, we have to speak up and spread it around like wildfire, because that's the only way people are gonna know what's going on.
And it's kind of sad, like obviously like abductions and trafficking itself is sad on the face of it, but when you now dig deep into the actual confession saying that he realized that black women simply wouldn't move the needle in terms of like public outrage or anything, that is something like, it's a sad reality of events for black people and black women in particular.
And it's like we deal with that so much, like even when you think about the medical field, right? So when a woman of color is talking about pains, her doctor's like, oh yeah, like you'll be fine. So like a woman's voice is never taken seriously. So it's kind of like when a white woman is going through something, it's like, oh my gosh, everyone, we have to stop. Like the world stops, like, are you okay? Are you fine? But when a black woman is complaining about something, it's like, sis, you got this, or you're strong enough. Like, what? It's not that serious. When in reality, it's like, it really is. And I think the beautiful thing about media is that now I've seen a lot of black men and women kind of like taking ownership of that, right? And like, we just spread things out, we actually take the initiative to like let people know what's really going on, because we're tired of waiting. We're tired of waiting with mainstream media. And I mean, to my understanding, I don't even know if anyone has even mentioned it, has even talked about what's been going on with the human trafficking and the abductions when it comes down to politics. I'm not a politics fiend or an expertise, but I wonder if anyone in our government has even decided to even mention and talk about what's been going on. I don't even think that's happened.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the whole thing about like black women not being like taken seriously when it comes to medical stuff, because our last episode we had like an OBGYN come on, and she mentioned where there's situations even amongst like people in the field who feel like they have to be more of advocates for the patients and like allow them to be able to speak up. And because at some point, like once you realize your voice isn't being heard or taken seriously, you just stop speaking. And that's something that we really can't have in the medical field. And as for people or candidates that are maybe bringing up the stuff like this, I feel like maybe they don't want to bring it up because once you bring up a problem, you have to bring up a solution as well.
True.
And if you're not equipped for that, or you don't have a reasonable solution, it ends up being a net negative. But hopefully, at least some of them have a plan going forward.
Yeah.
All right. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is a new movie called Queen and Slim. So it's gotten I don't want to say mixed reviews, because at first all I was saying was it was a really good movie.
Yeah.
And then it sort of like the conversation sort of turned in like regard to, oh great, another movie about black angst. And I don't know, have you seen the movie? Or
I haven't seen it yet. Okay. I do plan to see it. Like I really want it. So when I go see, like anytime I go to the movies, I like going in the daytime because I'm an old lady on the low, so I'll fall asleep in the movie theater at like 8 o'clock. So I would rather go to movies in the morning. So I do plan to see it, hopefully by this weekend. But I think one of the things that I've realized that when it comes down to anything, like people are never going to be 100% satisfied. I don't think it's humanly possible to create anything where like you're going to make sure that every single person is pleased. But from the things I've seen, at least on social media, I've heard people say it's been a great movie, so I'm curious to start to read. Well, not now, I'm gonna wait till after seeing the movie because I feel like someone's gonna mess up the ending for me. Right. So I'm curious after watching the movie to kind of read other people's like thoughts on it.
Yeah, so like I haven't seen the movie yet. I do plan on seeing it, but the thing that I like to, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, I don't really pay more like attention to the action. It's more of the reaction, because that gives you a better barometer of what society or people have to say about it. And what is going on now is sort of this turn from really good movie to, okay, well, is this the only kind of story they can tell about black people? And to an extent, I get what they're saying, where they're coming from. They don't just want it to be black trauma on the screen every single time.
Yeah.
But then when you say that, you're sort of dismissing like every other black movie that's out. It's because there's been other black movies that are just out. Maybe you haven't seen them.
Yeah.
But then this is the one that gets the most traction because maybe it's a better movie, or maybe it's the nature of the subject matter that makes it more likely to like draw a response.
And even to add, like, I think people have to be mindful that when it comes down to storytelling, it's not just only in one form. I think people are so used to storytelling only be through movies, but there are people who have positive messages, and this may not be quote unquote positive, right? Again, I don't know, I haven't watched the movie, but people do storytelling like through books. People do storytelling through art, through like music, through poetry, through like fashion industries, through everything. So I think for people to only put this expectation on, you know, when it comes into telling the story of our culture, of our reality, that it's only going to be allowed in a movie form, that's not fair. Like, that's not realistic. Where there's so many people who have different types of stories and messages in different aspects of it. So again, I feel like people have this unrealistic expectation, and like you're not going to be able to please everyone. And to be honest, like when somebody's sharing their story, it is not always going to be beautiful, right? And just because something may not be quote unquote positive, it doesn't mean that it's not somebody's truth. It's not somebody's reality, you know, or pretty much it doesn't mean that it's not somebody's fear or somebody's desire. Like, it may be somebody's desire to take away, you know, somebody who is a cop's life just based off of their personal experiences, or, you know what I mean? So I think people have to remember that the reality of our world is not glitz and glam.
So what about when people who say like, okay, now black trauma is being turned into a genre, where like it could either be a slave movie, or like in this instance, Queen and Slim, where there's like a very, very real narrative to it about police brutality. Mm-hmm. But then they're like, they don't want this being projected on the screen like over and over when there's other stories that could be told.
Yeah.
And I get where they're coming from, because like nobody wants their trauma, something that they feel is very real to them, that they may have in fact experienced, like being the thing that's popularized, when there's other black stories that are available, mm-hmm. that are like something like Hidden Figures, for instance, where it's like, okay, like these were literally hidden figures that their contribution was almost wiped away for something so monumental. Yeah. Like, how come we have more stories like, how come we can't have more stories like that? But once it's something that requires like violence against black bodies, they're so quick to green light those projects.
Yeah.
So I mean I get it, but you can't pick. It's unfair to want to pick and choose which stories are being told when there was a time when none of our stories were being told.
True.
But so.
And you make a good point, but I also would challenge whoever would make statements like that and ask, well, if you don't see something, right, then it's up to you to begin to create that narrative. So if somebody feels like there's just so much like trauma out there and you want people to share other stories, other facets of history, then it's like there are so many people in this world that have not said yes to their calling, and those are the people that are supposed to show those different faces. And like, yeah, even with Hidden Figures, like when you think of the promo of it, it wasn't to the same extent as Queen and Slim, you know. And so even when you sit there and you're comparing and contrasting, you definitely see the differences. Like a lot of families were advocating for, of course, Hidden Figures because that was a movie that you can show in the schools. Queen and Slim, it's not something you're gonna show to school. But I'm gonna be honest, right. And see, and I can't wait to watch it so I can see why it shouldn't be shown. But it doesn't mean that clearly our younger, you know, people aren't watching it. One, and then again, it's just kind of like, you know, I feel that Black trauma has to be talked about. Right. And I think because we've gone years without talking about it, right? There's cultures. It's a taboo to talk about trauma. You know, even some of our parents dealt with trauma and they passed it on to us through how they raised us and didn't even realize it, right? And as much as we think that, I think that even if this movie was not shown, with trauma is still present in our community. When you turn on the news, that's trauma. Even when we talked about the abductions and the human trafficking and how prevalent that has become, and how there's not that much of an urgency around people of color, that is traumatic. You know what I mean? And I think in this world, like, we're now saying, listen, America, this is what's going on. What are we gonna do about it? Like, people complain, but don't want to provide, I don't want to say they don't want to provide solutions, but I think people have to remember that sometimes if something is problematic, you have to bring it up, and then maybe this will force people to start thinking about realistic solutions. Like, let's now start talking about, like, just like mental health, and let's talk about therapy. Like, we have to start talking about these things, because just because you don't talk about it doesn't mean it's not, you know what I mean, happening.
So I'm glad you brought up therapy, because like I feel like lately the stigma attached to therapy or even discussions regarding mental health are slowly but surely eroding, and that can only be a good thing, because like if you saw somebody that was bleeding or with a broken limb or something, like you know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Because it's very apparent to you. But once it becomes something sort of mental, I feel like there's also denial on the part of the sufferer as well that might also make them like not want to seek help. But it could also be the fact that discussions like that also, like, it sort of like can make you like an outcast of sorts once you're labeled as the quote unquote crazy person or the unstable person, when all you need is literally like a mental health advocate or someone, just some sort of like treatment plan that deals with what you're dealing with. And if it's someone bleeding, or you know exactly what to do.
Yep.
Sanitize the wound, put a Band-Aid on it, and take some antibiotics. Everybody knows what the treatment plan once it's something physical, but the fact is, when it's something mental, we have a long way to go.
Yeah, I agree. And
the stigma is part of what prevents people from, even seeking help. And again, it circles back to this trauma situation where at some point I feel like some people are a bit desensitized now, where it's like, okay, every day you're seeing police videos. And when I like put that together with the response to Queen and Slim, I can get where people are coming from. Yeah. And also another thing that I don't want to come across as like being dismissive. Okay, first things first, criticism or critiquing it's central to art. Yeah. Like, it is part of the response. Like you said, all response cannot be 100% positive. Even in a positive like reception, there can be critique. Yeah. Like, because it can always be better. Like, and as the person producing the art, you don't necessarily even have to listen forget about agree with it. Like it's just a person's interpretation of what's been done.
Yep.
And I definitely like. I all I would say is that I hope people don't just dismiss a movie simply because of that, and maybe it triggers a certain thing, and I can understand that.
Yeah.
100%. All right, so there's I'm not sure if you saw this series on Netflix, When They See Us.
Whew, yes, I cried.
Yeah, so that was extremely triggering for some people, and because of the nature of it, where it's like, okay, now this is not just trauma in terms of being neglected, being mistreated, and actual physical violence at some parts against Black bodies. And but then that one felt a bit more like, it felt more systemic and systematic in a way like a lot of Black people can relate to, where it's not just the police, not just the criminal justice system, it's also like being behind bars, not even having proof, and coercion, and poverty, ignorance, not knowing your rights, and it's just like a whole bunch of things. Once you like put them all together, it can be overwhelming, because it's like if you knew better, you'd do better. But then some people already have that advantage before they even enter the room, because there's certain things they would do with a Black defendant or Black suspect that they wouldn't do with someone of another race. And you could be in all kinds of denial about it, but it's truth, and
can't take it away. And it took me a while to watch all of it. I know some people who haven't watched it because they said that they know they won't be able to handle it. Because it's triggering. But I think the interesting thing with When They See Us is this is real. This was their life. And I question the people who, and I get it, like it's triggering, right? Like totally get it. But especially for those who may not be of African American descent, I always think and like to challenge, but not outwardly. But I always think about, when it comes into being an advocate for the Black community, it sometimes is going to require you to put your emotions and the feelings to the side to have at least a little bit of understanding, because in that moment when you feel that little bit of like, this makes me feel really uncomfortable, this is painful to watch, why am I watching this? It's a reminder of this was someone's reality. So when you have an opportunity to really be an actual ally for the Black community, you're pulling from the bag of emotions that you felt from, like, whether it's watching the film or even reading about it. So if you can't watch it, I definitely challenge you to read about it, like to kind of read the history about it. Because again, like certain things are triggered. I'll never subject somebody, tell them like you have to watch it. Right. But I think that if you're going to stand to be an advocate, that you at least need to know the history of things. And I think we live in a world where if it makes somebody uncomfortable, they like to walk away completely. They shut down completely. Exactly. And again, it's like, this is why certain people go really, really hard for certain causes, is because they're like, listen, this is their reality, and I can't stand to see certain things happen. You know what I mean? Because like, yes, you can turn off the TV or you can put the computer down and not have to read it. But guess what? All of the victims in that case still have to live with the memories of what took place. And what is the guy's name? The one that was he was Corey Weiss. Yeah, and like even when he talks, like you can see still the trauma he's experiencing. So like you can't even, like I can't even go on any YouTube thing and type his name in and not feel this sense of like pain for him. You know what I mean? And right. and I think what's probably different with seeing that movie and of course Queen and Slim is because, I mean, I haven't watched Queen and Slim, but that movie was more of a documentary of actual events and right. for them to share their story. And so, I mean, in this world, I think what's happening is many people are like, listen, y'all not sharing the story, we're going to share it. And yes, it's going to be gruesome. And yes, it's going to be painful, but the story has to be shown. Because storytelling isn't only about the glitz and glams and yes, I made it. Yes, I made all this money. But storytelling is telling people's actual stories, even at the risk of triggering things and so on and so forth.
So I think that also speaks to a level of privilege for people who can just afford to like turn it off once it becomes uncomfortable. And those are the people we're trying to reach with stuff like this, because mm-hmm. you don't have to tell Black people about police brutality, like we already know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the people you're trying to reach who have a certain level of privilege, they're the ones who can afford to simply close a laptop or turn off the TV or change the channel, and that no longer is like something they have to subject themselves to. All right, so we're gonna take a quick break here, and then we'll be right back. We're back, and I'm joined here by Joy.
Hey guys.
All right, so I wanted to get into, like we said, you're a lifestyle blogger and empowerment speaker.
Mm-hmm.
So could you give us like a little like explanation on what that is?
Yeah, so I always like to say I'm not the typical lifestyle blogger. And I say that because when you think about lifestyle blogging, people normally think about beauty products, you know, clothes, people going out trying different restaurants, and I love those bloggers. And there's times when I may dabble in it a little bit, but for me, I like to blog from a place of we're gonna get to the root of certain things, but it starts from the inside out. So our lifestyle choices is really rooted from the things we've experienced, like whether it's heartbreak, whether it's disappointment. And I like to blog from that stance. And I actually started blogging first. And when I blogged, like I didn't want to speak. Like that was not part of the plan at all. Like I literally was, I still remember this, like when I launched my initial blog page, it was through WordPress at the time. And it was just it was as basic as it could be. There was no pictures of me, maybe one in the main page, but it was just regular blogs and that was it, right? I wasn't posting as much about it. And so like the speaking thing, this is my second year doing it. And it was one of those things where somebody was like, Joy, you should speak. You know, and I'm like, speak to who and for what? Like, do you not know who I am? But like even that, like it goes a little bit even deeper because I, like all of this, it's a surprise, but it's not really a surprise. And really quickly, I remember my senior year in high school, which was a long time ago, over 10 years ago.
Okay.
I remember it was my senior advisor. She calls me to her classroom and randomly. So I'm like nervous and I wasn't a bad kid, but I'm just like, why is she calling me? And so she told me that, and in high school I ran track. I ran cross country, indoor and outdoor track.
Okay.
So people knew me as the runner, as like I was like a jock without actually looking and acting like a jock. But so she brings me to her classroom and is like, so you are the senior class president, and so you need to write a speech, and when you do, send it to me and you're good. I never ran for president. I don't know who put my name in. I don't know why. So, and what came to my mind was, wait, I have to do a speech. So I remember this like it was yesterday. I was in English class, and I remember as my teacher at the time, he was teaching, and I had my notepad out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I had this idea for my speech, and I just started writing, and I could not stop writing. And when I stopped, I looked down, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my graduation speech. And like at that moment was when I realized, like, yo, when you have that urge to just write about something, you just do it, and even if it comes left field. And then I looked at it, I made a couple of edits, and I was like, this is it. And who would have guessed years later that I would find myself kind of tapping into that? And it's funny because I felt like at that moment, like that was God's like, you know, like that was the appetizer of pretty much what he was going to bring me into years later. And like in college, I did like open mics and stuff like that. Nothing serious. I didn't want to look at it as like, oh, there's something I'm going to do to empower people. So it's funny that it really kind of started the speaking my senior in high school without me realizing it.
So I noticed you said with the blog first, like that was sort of what led into it. So what made you start the blog in the first place?
Ooh, so this is why I'm gonna do a shameless plug.
Okay.
People should definitely read my latest blog post because I actually blogged about what led me to blogging. It's speakwithjoy.net. But what actually led me to blogging was a breakup.
Oh,
and
okay.
So most people don't know that I did move originally from Connecticut. So I moved from Connecticut to New Jersey to be closer to my boo at that time.
Oh.
We never lived with each other, you know, like I have Nigerian parents. They're not going to be like,
hey,
my daughter's out, you go and live with this boy. Like my parents will, yeah, they were not going to have that, but we were close to each other, right? So our distance that was a little over 2 hours was now 20 minutes.
Oh,
And
okay.
when I was in a relationship, I wasn't thinking about purpose. I didn't know what purpose was. I was like, well, I'm finishing up my master's program. I'm working, and I got a man, and I go to church. I'm good. And like that's it. Like I didn't think about my future. I didn't think about what my likes were and what my dislikes were. It's like I didn't think about what my hobby was. But until he ended that relationship, I remember I was on a phone call with somebody who was like my mentor at the time, and she was like, God wanted me to tell you that, girl, you should write. And have you heard of a blog? And that's when I was like, what's a blog? And here I'm on the phone with her, Googling a blog and then hearing her speak. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna launch a blog, because it was in the month of November. It was December. She and I had the conversation. The relationship ended in November, like 5 years ago. So I had already a couple of weeks of like being in my feelings, so much things built up, and I knew I needed to release it. And so she was like, what's the title of your blog? And literally, I kid you not, 30 seconds later, I opened my mouth and I was like, it's gonna be called Emotional Leakage Through Ink. I always tell people like that was God who told me to like have that as my title, because there's no way. I mean, I'm creative, but I'm not that creative. Like there's no way that that's coming straight from me. And then in the month of February of the following year, I launched it. So if that breakup did not happen, I would have not been blogging. I would not have been speaking. And at that moment, it took for the relationship to like fail. And I kind of knew it was supposed to be over, but I'm a ride or die and I'm loyal. So I always stick things out. And I feel like at that moment, God was like, listen, I'm giving you all these feelings inside, and you know you're not supposed to be with this person. And God was like, listen, you're not gonna listen to me? Bet. He broke up with me. And so at that moment, it was like sad, right? Like I moved from a brand new state to a brand new state, and I had the option of moving back to Connecticut or moving with my parents. And well, they actually were living in Georgia at the time. I could have just moved in with them, but something in me told me, stay in New Jersey. And as foolish as it was for you to have left one state to another for a relationship, and at the time we were just talking, like seriously talking, monogamously talking. When I got to Jersey months later, we were in a title boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. And I have so much to say about that. That's another episode.
Oh, don't worry. We got time. Don't worry.
Because I would tell women, don't move for a man until that is your man. And man, like, until that is husband. Like,
okay.
Because people, again, like, I look at my trends in the past, like, I gave up a lot of things, right? Like, I chose my grad school based off of a relationship at the time. When I had an opportunity to go to grad school in California. So, and I was like, no, I'm in a relationship with someone and I want to be closer to them. And then a year later, the relationship crashed. But it was something in me told me, stay in New Jersey. Yes, it may look foolish, right? Like people are gonna be like, it wasn't
another relationship that said you should stay in New Jersey, though, right?
Nope, it was. There's a reason why you moved to New Jersey, and I did not know what the reason was, but I was like, all right, God, I'm gonna stay. I need you to do your magic. Because I know people from the outside looking in was probably acting like my life was a movie theater, had their popcorn ready for the drama, you know, and at that moment was when I realized, like, you know, God would really turn something that actually may appear as foolish and ugly to make it something so beautiful. And I felt like at that moment that was it. And like, not to like preach or to, you know, take it to church, but like there's a Bible verse that says that all things work together for the good of those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. And so everything that I felt like was so stupid at the time, looking back, I'm like, Joy, why would you have moved? Mind you, I was 24 going on to 25. So I was really, really young, and I'm 31 now. I look back and I'm like, God, you literally turned this around for your glory. And I can honestly say, since being in New Jersey, God has always looked out. Like every moment when I've come across various types of situations where it's like, Joy, you don't gotta stress about certain things. Like you can just move to Georgia, or you can move back to Connecticut. And it was always an opportunity where I questioned, God, am I supposed to be in Jersey? Where things always worked out where I stayed. And so I guess the long story short, that's kind of what leveraged me into blogging.
So the blog was born out of pain, you would say?
Purpose-driven pain. That is my motto. And my other motto is, and if anybody quotes this, please add me because I need my credit. Whatever you're going through, somebody's how-to book. So I had to deal with a lot, and it wasn't just from that relationship, but from previous relationships, and even being single and dating, and with the mistakes I've made. Like, that's other women's and other men's how-to book, right? Like, I feel like I'm a little bit more relatable because I can be in certain conversations and I can tell somebody like, girl, let me tell you a story, and they be like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who's going through this. You know what I mean? And I think that at that moment in my life, like, I didn't realize how ungroomed I was. I didn't realize how naive I was, how much me not knowing certain things that I should have known, I should have been taught, but I wasn't taught because of culture, was impacting. And that was as a result. And moving to Georgia would have never helped. You know, I would have been under my parents' roof until I decided to get my own place, and I would have been babied. I would have been sheltered. I would have never learned, you know, certain things. Like, pretty much the way that I move now, people might be like, oh, you really put your foot down, because I was walked over so many times where it's like, listen, I had to learn the hard way.
So that's that purpose-driven pain you were talking about.
Okay. Definitely.
All right. So have you had any contact with this ex since the blogging started?
So it's funny because he actually brought me, and this is me being transparent. So he brought me to my current church. So women and men, when you're dealing with the heartbreak, yes, there's truth in out of sight, out of mind. But what happens when they're not really out of sight? How do you then learn to, because it forces you to heal in a different way, right? So he brought me to my current church, and we used to sit on the same side. Once he ended it, he was still going to that church. I'm sitting on the other side. And so the church I go to, shout out to my church, Agape Family Worship Center in Broadway, under Pastor Dr. Lawrence Powell. I have to give him a shout out. I was involved in ministry, right? So I used to be a Sunday school teacher. I'm not a Sunday school teacher anymore.
Okay, but we'll get into that. Okay.
But I did it for like 3 years. But I also did the welcome, part of the welcome ministry, and I'm still doing that now. Okay. And what the welcome ministry entails is that you have to stand and welcome all the first-time guests. And so my church is live streamed, so I go to a probably like big church. So having to do the welcome when your ex is there, you have to greet everyone. There's a script I have to say and be all bubbly, you know, in front of the camera, and having to look at somebody who broke your heart. And to make things even more interesting is having to do that with his girlfriend there.
Oh, whoa.
So I know, left field,
wow.
No one was expecting that. But I mean, you know, when that happened, when it comes to social media, like, you see things. We're not social media friends or anything like that, but at that moment it was like, ooh. So I was already used to seeing him, and we had mutual friends. We were at the same wedding one time. And when I knew that was going to be our really first interaction, because I did see him one time at like a ShopRite, I remember I was like, I called him and I was like, listen, we're going to be at the same wedding. I need to know that I don't hate you. I'm not, and I said, I don't want to block my blessing. You know what I mean? But when things had ended, he's not a bad person. He's not. You know, I can't, when I talk about my past, I don't talk about it in a way where it's like, he's horrible, da-da-da, because that's how much I've healed and I'm over it. Okay. You know what I mean?
All right. I respect that.
Side note, ladies, if you meet a man who talks about their past relationships in a negative way, he ain't ready to date.
Oof.
That's as real as it can get. Well, I think for anybody, but he, I remember when things ended, he was like, if you ever need anything, let me know. If you have a flat tire, because again, he knew I'm not from New Jersey, and I was very stern when I said, no, I am not your responsibility anymore. If I have a flat tire, I have to figure it out myself. You know, because if I stay connected to you like that, even though I still saw him in certain places, he doesn't go to my church anymore, so people know. Even if I saw you in certain places, it would be me putting one foot in and the other foot out. That even though I can call you to fix my tire, you may just look at it as you being just like the nice person that you are. But that might give me a little bit of hope that I know is not there. So even if I meet somebody, I would never give a person the actual fair chance, because I'm still connected to you, and I don't want to do that. So, yeah.
That's some very elite self-awareness right there.
It took me a while to realize, and I'm gonna be honest, like, at this point, especially when it comes down to dating, I don't think that there's certain things that can surprise me as much. Just the level of exposure to certain things. And then also, like, I feel like with my future daughter, she's going to just love the stories I tell her. But I'm going to be very upfront and tell her certain things, well, all things, because she needs to know certain things to, you know, to actually look out for, you know. And so when people say, oh, I experienced a heartbreak, I gotta stop doing everything in life. No, keep going. Even if you see them, keep going. You know what I mean? You never realize how strong you are until you have no other choice but to be strong.
Okay. All right. And are these like some of the topics that you cover in your blog, like, or was that just a phase back then when the heartache was still like raw, or do you just, or has it sort of morphed into something else where it's more like advice driven instead of just you venting?
Yeah, it's more advice driven, but in a transparent way. So I would hope that when people read my blog, they don't read the tone of, girl, she's venting. And I think people have to be, I mean, your blog is your story, but I've also noticed in some people's blog, it becomes their diary. And that's a personal choice. But anything that I posted from a transparent stance. So there's knowledge, there's advice, there are things to me showing my self-awareness on certain things that just kind of came to light that I'll share. Like the recent blog about what led me to blog. You know, I mentioned, like, I shared my story and people say, thank you for sharing your story. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, Joy, are you okay? I just read your thing, right? I think some people read it were like, dang, girl, first of all, I don't know, you know, like that like you had someone break up with you, and that the fact that you moved to another state and then you stayed, I didn't know that you know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of my posts kind of, it definitely shows that. Yeah, and I always post based off of what I'm led to post.
So then how did you go from blogging to the speaking portion of it?
So the speaking is, and this is why it's important for people to, when you start something, you have to put yourself out there, right? Like, you have to share your gift, because whatever you're supposed to do, you're not supposed to do it by yourself. People think like, oh, I got this, I can do this by myself. No, you can't. Certain opportunities are through referrals. So True. With that being said, I remember I had a hall director. There was a hall director at my old school, at Southern Connecticut State University. She was a hall director in Jersey it was at Bloomfield College at the time. And I remember she actually sent me a message on Facebook, was like, oh, there's a speaking opportunity. I really think you should do this because I see you doing your blogging and you're posting things, and I just think you should. And mind you, at that time, like, this was right after I launched my blog and was a little bit more consistent. And so I applied and I ended up speaking. And so that would never happen if I didn't say yes to my purpose, if I didn't put myself out there, because it was a referral. You know, even when I was on Madame Noor with Ask a Black Woman, I didn't find that on my own. I remember one of my college friends, her name is Mimi. Shout out to Mimi. She tweeted the application to apply to be a part of the YouTube series. So I did, and I got it. Again, I would have never known that was an opportunity if she hadn't referred.
And Madame Noor is?
The online magazine for women of color. Oh, okay. So they have this Ask a Black Woman series, and so my episode and it's like you being real, talking about your experience, was the modern day woman. Oh, okay. And so I know how appropriate. Okay. But I didn't get that on my own. So a lot of the speaking opportunities was through, it started from a referral.
Okay, because as someone who isn't really a fan of speaking, but yet has a podcast.
And you have a nice speaking voice too.
All right, you don't have to say that, so it's okay. But yeah, no, someone who doesn't really like speaking but has a podcast. I know it sounds like counterintuitive or whatever, but like, I guess this is the level I'm willing to put myself out there. Like, this is like the little comfort zone. I'm like, okay, I'll like dip a toe in or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, when it comes to like public speaking, like that's almost like consensus, like the number one fear for a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Like, the fact that you're already like willing and able to get up in front of hundreds of thousands of people to speak, like, you have no idea like just how far ahead you are. Like, because I feel like that's how like not to like get all cynical, but I feel like that's how like a lot of fake pastors or a lot of people who are into duping people, they are just the fact that they're willing to be on that platform where it's just they could be bullshitting, they could be saying the truth, but the fact that they're willing to be up there gives them so much power over people because they're doing something that so many people just aren't even willing to do.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're able to do it, I commend you like 100.
Oh.
Because I would never do this podcast. Well, not never, because I probably said that about doing a podcast in the first place. But I probably wouldn't be comfortable to do this like in a live setting.
Yeah.
Or like with
I'm waiting 2020.
That's please don't put that out there because with your luck, like it's probably gonna happen and somebody's gonna call me and
yes.
And but for real, like there's a bunch of lists where people list public speaking as a worse fear than drowning.
Yeah.
And that is wild to think of, except when you think of the last time you were called to speak in public and it's like, I'd rather be in the ocean right now, so I don't know how you do it, but
I don't know either. And I think people have to remember, I am afraid. First of all, if I had it, and I think people have to keep this in mind, if it was up to me, keyword, if it was up to me, I would not be blogging or I would not be speaking, right? Because there's a reality that comes with it that many people are not aware of. They only see what they see on Instagram or on my website. They don't see the amount of sacrifices I've had to make. They don't see that I work a 9-to-5 job. I work full time, right? And then when I get off from work, like there's been times like I'll just go to Starbucks until 11 o'clock to edit a blog, or I have to prep for an event. They don't see that. Or there's times like I would search for certain opportunities. Like they don't see that part, and I'm afraid. I'm afraid to talk. Like public speaking is not easy, but it's not. I always give the credits and kudos to God, because I think what happens is if you think that you can do something 100% on your own, then I feel like you're not as good as you may put yourself or you think you are. I think there's a different level of like anointing and blessing that God has for people who may not think that they're like the like best or the strongest. Because it's like when the lady told me, or had referred to me, the speaking opportunity, I'm looking at myself like, who, me? And God's like, yeah, you. And I'm like, and I'm arguing with God like, bruh, me? Like, and I'm listing people who I think is better suited, like, they're already in the game. But I personally think that that's what the beautiful part about purpose and even public speaking is that, like, when you feel unqualified, like, that is an opportunity for you to become qualified. So I'm always afraid, even at my church when I do the welcome, I'm afraid each and every time.
Really?
When I have to, and there's a script I memorized, right? And before I do everything or anything, like, I pray about it. I'm like, God, use me as your mouthpiece. I don't got this. I don't have the strength. I'm not equipped. And like, just what I feel like that actually does, it allows yourself to really be used. It allows yourself to realize, like, your, like, gifts and your talents, yes, it comes from you, but it's not really coming from you. It's coming from God. Like, I've done an event, and my friends were there, they're like, girl, you were so good. And I was like, so all of the prep I did, I didn't use any of it.
Wow.
And again, it's like, you can prep all you want, but when you allow yourself to really be used by God's gonna be like, it was great that you prepped. That was cute. That was cute. All right, bam, I'm gonna have you talk about something completely opposite of what you initially planned for. And then there's sometimes this level of confidence that actually comes from, like, God. It comes from the help of the Holy Spirit, where it's like, it leads you to talk. There's certain things, like I said, and people are like, oh my gosh, girl, that was so impactful, that was helpful. And in my head, I'm like, really? I didn't realize I said it, And so that's why with anything I do, I have to. It is imperative for me to stay as connected to God as possible. Because if I am disconnected to God, I'm gonna be trash. I am nothing without Him, especially with what I've been doing with speaking and blogging.
So I wanted to get into some of the difficulties that you've faced, and I know you mentioned, like, being in Starbucks till like 11 o'clock
Mhm.
or searching for these speaking engagements.
Mhm.
So like, in case there's anyone listening who's like maybe is like on the fence considering it, like, and you don't want to just, I know you don't want to paint the picture that's just rosy and you're just like
Yeah.
people throwing flowers at you wherever you go, but
Yeah.
they want to know like, okay, what's the like the real deal with like this life.
Yeah.
And like for them it might be a calling as well, but you know they may be, you know, maybe having second thoughts or
Mhm.
just want to have like a realistic expectation of what goes into it, because
Yeah.
it's like when you're there are a lot of things where you're going into like whether it's med school or being a driver or whatever, like where you can get information about what it's like living that life,
Yeah.
because it's so foreign from what everyone else is doing at the time.
Mhm.
So maybe like you could just walk them through like some of the chief difficulties you faced, or even if it's like sort of something internal or external pushback that you got.
Yeah. I think one of the things is that the reality is that you'll be vulnerable. When you're vulnerable, you put yourself in the spotlight to actually be roasted.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think people, you know, as we approach 2020, everyone has all of these goals and they're beautiful. But understand that once those goals start manifesting, once you start your like website and your blogging and your speaking, there's always gonna be people who are not gonna be like cheering you on, right? And a lot of times, like, yes, we know they're strangers, but sometimes it's people who are closer to you than you think.
Oof, don't even get me started on that.
And you'll also realize another reality is like everyone. So when it comes up to support, and what does support look like, right? So support comes in multiple ways. So support can be buying your like friend's product. It can be, you know, posting your thing. It can be reading, giving feedback. And I think the reality sometimes is that you're gonna sometimes feel alone. And because remember, everyone has their own thing going on in their life.
Very true.
And so it will cause you to kind of have a lot of your me time doing your stuff. But that's a great opportunity where you are able to self-reflect, where you become a little bit more self-aware, and you are forced to really know you when you're blogging. And another reality is like you're gonna find yourself comparing yourself, especially when you compare the likes and you compare the shares, you compare what is popular. But that's when you have to go back to the root of your why. Like, why are you blogging? Are you blogging because you want to be popular? Are you blogging because it's trending? Because if that is the case, your blogging is not gonna last. You know what I mean? And I think people start so many things and they don't finish it because the fact that they haven't been able to really identify their why. And for me, I'm not gonna lie, like there was a moment where I didn't blog for like 6 months because I was actually revamping my site, and I just felt like when I was doing that, it wasn't good enough. And I was just like, I'm not ready to re-release it, let me stop. And then those like 6 months of not blogging was like the worst 6 months of my life. I felt like something was missing. There was something that was incomplete. And like that's how I knew. I was like, okay, God, this is my identity. This is a part of who I am. And you'll get to even add to the roastings depending on what you're blogging about. And I want to say this particularly towards women. If you're blogging about, you know, dating and relationships and tips, everyone is not going to be rooting for you. I remember getting a message from a man. He sent me a DM and he was like, I hope you understand that like what you post is actually going to push away guys from you. And I'm just like, correction, sir, a boy, because a real man is going to value a woman who is really about her business. Because if you're blogging in a way where the content is really supposed to help people's life, you're gonna say some things that are not popular,
right?
Or you should be, because a lot of the things that aren't popular is probably the most helpful tips that people need, anyways. And everyone always has something to say, and some people will say it to your face, and you don't want to receive it, right? And so I think for women who are interested in blogging about like relationships and what it's like and the reality of certain things, there are some guys who might be like, you sound bitter, you sound X, Y, and Z, but the consistency of what you do will show the realness of what you're about, whatever it is that you're about. And I would also say like you know, going back to what you said, the long hours, especially if you work 9 to 5. Like I've had people tell me, quit your full time and do this, and I'm like, with what money?
Yeah.
Like, I still got stuff to do, and for anyone who is, you know, doing their blogging as their full-time, kudos to you. Share with me some of the tips so I can one day do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have other responsibilities, right, or if you're in school, or if you have a child that you want to blog, like, it is going to require a lack of sleep sometimes, right? Like, your Saturday mornings, you know, most people may spend it sleeping in. You might spend it waking up in the morning, getting writing in, just so that you can hang out with your friends after. But it will require you to understand, like, how your brain functions. So my brain functions very well to be able to do a lot of editing, although sometimes I do it at night in the morning time. So, like, Saturday mornings are, like, great for me, or even mornings before work. But I mean, I guess the list can go on and on, but those are some of the things that stand out.
So I wanted to get back to the part where you said about the support, where there's like there are different ways people can support you, but you also have to realize that they have their own thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that that I struggled with initially when I was starting the podcast, where it's like, oh, how come my friends aren't doing it? I'm like, bruh, like, first of all, like, it's a podcast, so it requires like a call to action where it's like, okay,
yeah.
Not only are you putting it out there, but they have to want to listen to it. They have to find the means of listening to it, and they have to find the time to listen to it.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a lot of things that go into it, and expecting someone to do that regularly is no small feat. Like, so it's like, sure, there's some people who listen to it strictly because they're my friends, and I appreciate them. Like, even if it's trash, they're like, "Oh, good job," and I'm like, yeah, thanks, but okay, well, what did you really think?
Yeah.
And there's also some people who like repost just everything I do, no matter what. Like, even if they don't listen, they repost it, and I appreciate that as well. But after a while, like you sort of like, it's easy to say that now that I get it, that people do have their own things that they're doing, and again, to people who might be starting a blog, like, you might feel like, oh, I have 400 friends here, like I should expect at least half of them to repost. I'm like, yeah, not so fast. Like,
right.
Like, not so fast. Like, if you get 4 people to repost it, that's a
kudos.
That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like, because not only is it like, okay, them, sure, it's a click of a button or whatever, but in a way, it's also an endorsement from them where they're like putting like, okay, I'm putting my name on this product, and maybe they just don't think it's good. And you have to be ready for that reality.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I'm not sharing it because I don't think it's good.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear that, or do you just want, like, okay, just do what you can? And like, that's something where I feel like I've had to learn on the go, where it's like, oh, how come like you haven't said anything about this, or I mentioned this specifically about this conversation and blah blah. It's like, yeah, but bro, like, everybody's like, once you start putting things out there, it's hard to imagine like everybody's life doesn't revolve around that, because you've put so much of yourself and your time into it.
Yeah.
And it sounds very elementary, but once you're in it, it's like not everything revolves around what you're putting out there.
Yeah. And you know, and that's something, and I'm still learning. Like, that's a ever going struggle. So, and I'm being fully transparent with that. So I definitely get it. It's funny because once you start doing what you're supposed to be doing, you get more support from people who don't know you or who have never met you. I have connected people. One young girl. She's from, I don't want to say she's somewhere in Africa. I forgot. I want to say somewhere on the West Coast, West Africa. I forgot which country. And this girl regularly was hitting me up and telling me, oh my gosh, your post, da 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 da. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're actually really reading this, right? I've never met you. I have connected with people from different states. Like, I'm speaking in February in Florida, and I connected with her through like blogging and posting. You know what I mean? And I've realized that people then want to hop on the bandwagon to share your stuff, or to quote unquote really actively, you know, endorse you and to promote you once you've made it to, like, if you work for BET or if you're quote unquote famous. Now everyone's like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. But you weren't celebrating the little wins. So, you know, I think it's one of those things where I don't expect it. You know what I mean? Because every time I'm just like, there was a point where I was like, again, God, I really gotta do this. And every time I was like, I think I'm gonna push it to the side. I don't wanna do this anymore. I always got that random message from a random person whom I never met, right? And they would always say, oh my gosh, your like post is very helpful. Or if I post something on Instagram, it resonated with me. You know, and I think then I have to constantly remind myself, like, you know, if I have friends who are like, oh my gosh, girl, I wanna hang out, and I'm just like, if you knew what I was doing, you would know that my answer is a no, because I have to work on this, right? There are certain things like I've worked on that I haven't shared with everyone. And there's a reason, because one, you're not supposed to share everything with everyone too soon, because you don't know who's praying against you. And then two, also, it's like, I don't think I need to share my quote unquote blueprint if you're not sharing my stuff, and there's no shade, and it's nothing. You know, there's nothing wrong or bad about it, but you know, I think for people who know me know, like, I have different types of relationships with different people that I've met throughout the past years from like blogging and speaking. And so every time certain people may call me, I'm like, oh hey girl, like, yeah, I'm actually into the city to hang out with people, you know what I mean, from that I may have connected with, whether on social media or something like that. But I think it is expected. It's okay to be in your feelings about it, right? But that should just mean it continuously be consistent, because one of the things that friendships, I mean, I can say this, like, one of the things that will allow people to realize like how serious you are about your craft is your consistency. Some people won't take you seriously until you take yourself and your branding seriously, your brand seriously. And so people kind of fall off because, oh my gosh, no one's posting my stuff. Your friends gonna be like, oh, see, that's a phase. But like, when you're consistent, and when people start to see like the fruit of it, when people start seeing the opportunities arise, like my friends from Connecticut, you know, they're my best friends. Like, they've gone to my speaking engagement. I remember the first time they came, they were like, oh wow, Joy, you're really good. And I'm like, what y'all think I was doing this entire time? Wasting my time. But I think it's one of those things where, and then also you have no idea, like, you being consistent, even despite the, you know, kind of like the lack of support, can be the same thing that can kind of, it can actually motivate your friends to kind of go out and really just begin to chase their dreams. But it's real, it's hard.
Yes.
But I think sometimes the most impact you can have is to a complete stranger who doesn't know you from a can of paint.
That is true. Because I like, when I post like my podcasts and stuff, I see like the numbers and the demographics of the listeners. I'm like, I don't know anybody in Kansas or who do I know in Minnesota that's listening, or I had someone that's listening in India, and so today I still think that person listened by accident. But I'm like,
they listen.
Yeah, I'm like, I appreciate you, India, or like New Zealand. I'm like, how is this getting out there? I'm like, no, I still appreciate it nonetheless. Like, obviously, majority of the listeners come from New Jersey, but like that, it still encourages you to keep going, because like, hey, like, this has to be like a completely random person who maybe Googled something and my podcast came up or whatever.
And that's beautiful, because it goes to show that your like podcast isn't just for you and your friends, it's for people that you have never even knew existed in this world. So that's the beautiful and powerful thing of when we don't get the support that we think we would need, when in reality, whether somebody posts the thing or not, your message is still being literally listened to across the world.
Right. And it would be kind of sad if only your friends were listening.
Right.
Yeah, it would.
Like, what kind of, it's already kind of biased. You know, like, oh yeah, you know, you only subscribe because that's your friend.
Yeah, that would make you feel some type of way. So do you have any advice for like novice bloggers, up and coming, or people who are even just considering, or maybe someone who, like, even before this podcast never even thought about it, but you're like, you know what, maybe I can do this?
So another plug, on my website, I definitely have a free 99 PDF on, so you want to start blogging. So that's something that people can definitely download, and it definitely goes over like the, you know, it goes over the various steps you need to check off if you really want to, if you're serious about doing the blogging thing. But a couple of things I will share is being consistent is so important. my biggest pet peeve of people who start things but don't finish it, right? Especially something that you're quote unquote passionate about. Now, it's not to say that you won't have bumps where you're going to stop for a period of time, and then, you know, when you feel uneasy because you know you should never stop, you kind of go back into it. But some people throw things away altogether. So I think being consistent is important. You'd be surprised. People notice your consistency, whether it doesn't even matter if people are liking it or not. And people will know you as that person of, oh wow, like you're the person who always blogs about, like, let's say you have a thing with like shoes. You always blog about shoes and you've been blogging about it for a while, you know, like that's how people know that you're really genuine about what you do. I would also say another thing is finding out, this is actually number one, finding out your why. Like, why do you want to do this? Again, it goes back to, are you doing this because it's a trend and it's popular and you're like, I want to grow my Instagram followers, or I want to seem popular, I want to seem like I have a perfect life? Then that's it. Like to be honest, that's not even enough reason to start. Finding out your why, because when you decide to step out on purpose, you have a responsibility, right? So it's fun and it's engaging and you meet awesome people, but you don't realize that you put people's lives in your hands in a sense. It's like some people give crappy advice, and I'm just like, you're gonna have to answer to all of the crap you put out there eventually. And so really figuring out your why, because it allows you to take yourself seriously, and that pretty much you're not just, you know, doing it like a hobby, because it's serious business. It's like people who create mentorship programs. I have a mentorship program that sounds cute. It's a lot, you know. I remember getting a message from a young lady who was dealing with a personal crisis, and I realized, like, yo, this is the reality of blogging. People are gonna bring to you real life problems, and real life problems that you're not even probably equipped to handle. And there are problems I was not equipped to handle that I had to be like, let me go on Google and here's numbers that you have to call and so on and so forth. But finding out your why, and then also plan. There's nothing wrong with planning. You know, I think we get into this thing where it's like, well, God got me, and he does, right? But plan, but also be open-minded to change. Because when you blog, things are like things are going to change over time, and you can't expect that. Some people might decide they have a passion for food. I'm going to be a food blogger. And then you start, and then in a year, you may transition from being a food blogger to, let's say, going in depth and doing it internationally, right? Some people might be like, well, that wasn't part of the plan, I'm not doing it. Well, all God needs is one yes for him to do whatever he wants to do anyways.
Right.
So I think it's one of those things where planning in advance, like I plan my my like blogs, even my Mondays with Joy, a month in advance, and I record it too, and I have to edit it myself and so on and so forth, because I'm not there yet where I can just pay somebody to record on their fancy equipment and edit it for me. Hence, I'm not there yet.
Yes.
So I think those are some of the things that people have to consider: planning it and doing research, and also make sure that, and I put this in the PDF, make sure you have a debit or credit card, because blogging is not free.
True.
That's the best way to even filter out who's serious about it and who's not, because you have to buy a domain. You want some pictures. And with the domain, like, yes, you pay for that one-time price, but you have that renewal every year, right? And then if you have other features on it, like if you want to have people put the reviews, at times they may take out, maybe if it's $2 a month, that adds up. Anyone else who wants to blog, I would say buy a mailbox. One of the things I've learned from Myleek, who is the founder of Curlbox, which is a beauty products for women of color. Like, they get this monthly subscription of different products they can try. She's one of my favorite podcasters, women of color, that talks about the business aspects. And she mentioned, when you buy a mailbox, it allows people to kind of take yourself seriously. So I have my regular email at gmail.com, but I have my email that I bought for my website, which is info@speakwithjoy.net. And when I give people my business card, they're like, oh, you got a mailbox. Okay, like, this is serious. And those little things will change the scope of your branding. Again, it goes back to, you have to take yourself seriously and your craft first very seriously, you know, just in order for other people to take you seriously. You got to demand respect through your actions and your investments.
So I'm happy you actually mentioned branding. So I know there's like the blogging portion of it, there's the speaking, but then a lot lately requires like an online presence, like specifically like Instagram. So, you know, like you've been doing some shameless plugs. I'll plug something as well. So I just started a little, you know, a little business, you know, called Naija Food Depot, where it's just like selling provisions, foodstuffs, and things like that. And I sort of just started an IG page for it. So I'd like to see like what you would give in terms of like advice, or use that as sort of case study in terms of starting or growing an online brand. Like, so what steps would you take, and like just use this as your like sort of your I guess case study for what you would go forward with.
So as a side note, people were probably thinking like, she must have 10, you know, K followers. No, I got a little over 4,000. Like, it's not a lot. Like, I'm not a guru or this or anything like that. But what I would say is being consistent with posting, being consistent with it. Consistency is important because, and also being engage with the audience. And by audience doesn't only have to be the people who go on your page, but go on other people's page who has very similar things, even something different, and engage and like and comment. That's very, very, very helpful. I always feel like finding your little niche, right? So my niche for my Instagram page, most people will know it's Mondays with Joy.
Right.
And I remember when I started it, ain't nobody paid attention to it, but I've done it for several years, and now people are like, girl, that Monday with Joy, I really like that. I remember I took the month of August off, and one of my friends was like, so wait, that means you're not posting Monday with Joy? I was like, no, I need me a break. And he was like, wait, like, so when do you plan to come back? Because it's the whole month, we're not going to see Monday with Joy. And I'm like, I'll be back the following month.
Right.
So it was one of those things where at that moment, I realized like people are used to it, because I found my niche. On Mondays, I would post a motivational, like, morning wake up affirmation reminder for people. And when you're consistent with that, people take notice, and people then have an expectation. So that means that people are coming to your page with an expectation. And then also for growing following, and sometimes I have to check myself with this, because I sometimes get caught up in like, oh gosh, I have this many likes, but like I see the person, but they got more, but they don't really be doing nothing, like you know. But one of the things I'm realizing and I've been learning is, you can have so many likes and people may not leave your page feeling good. You know, I think it goes back to, you know, what are, you know, like, just what are the expectations you have for people that come to your page? Are you expecting people to leave with the knowledge, like, listen, if I need some palm oil, I'm hitting you up, you know what I mean? Or are people, you know, it's like, if I'm referring your like Instagram page, I'm letting somebody know, like, listen, if you need X, Y, Z, he got you. Like, and they're reasonably priced, and you get more for your money, because you go to any of the small markets, they're gonna cheat you with it, right? So it's like being able to, if I'm saying this, that person go on your page and they see it and they sense it, and it's genuine, and like consistently post, and then also be authentic. Like, all of my pictures aren't a photo shoot, right? Like, if I'm going out to eat and I feel like my outfit is cute, hey sis, take my picture, you know, different angles, and I'm gonna post it, right? Because I think sometimes people forget that I'm a human being, and I think when you're creating this online presence, you can easily forget that you're a human being, and when you do, you don't allow yourself to be a human. You don't get yourself grace, and I think at one moment I felt like that. I felt like, how did I make this kind of mistake? Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be empowering people here. I'm a hot mess, and I had to be like, Joy, but you're not. Like, who do you think you are, God? You are a hot mess, sis. Own it. And it's okay to be authentic about it. And if I want to post a video saying, you guys, let me tell y'all how I got played. And guess what? I played myself because I wasn't following the various steps I should have been following, right? And admitting to certain things and just being real. And I think people connect with authenticity, you know, more than anything. Right? It doesn't matter what the likes says. You can have likes and not have any business. Like, I know people who have many likes, and they're coming to me asking me, hey, if you know any engagements, you know, speaking opportunities, let me know. Or I see you, you know, doing things. Most people don't know that I have another job. Like, this is my side thing, God willing for now. And there's people who don't know that like what I do for my 9 to 5 actually correlates with what I do with my blogging and speaking and some of the, you know, like topics. And I get to practice a lot of the things like I'm passionate about that I display on my social media at work. So it helps and it actually trains me. But I think what happens is, you know how you lose your train of thought?
So you were talking
I just lost my train of thought of what I was going with it.
You were talking about your 9 to 5 and how it links with your blogging and how you get to how it sort of you get to practice sort of when you're at work.
Yes, and it came right back. And I remember somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn because they didn't know what I was, you know, like what my job entails, and they were like, oh, if you know any jobs hired, you know all these things. And here I am, I'm like, but you're like the expert. Like, I should be going to you about opportunities and job opportunities, right? Because you're well connected. But that just goes to show likes mean absolutely nothing. Likes are not dollar signs unless the like you're getting is on YouTube and you are in that program where you're getting paid with that. But in reality, like, you know, I think it winds down to another one of my mottos. It's not about popularity, it's about impact. And you know, are you really going to impact someone's life? Because you'd be surprised when somebody needs a particular blogger or a particular speaker or somebody in a business of some sort, they're not always going to be getting the popular person. They may, if it's going to bring money, right? But if they know that this person that may have 300 followers, but they just say some very amazing things that is going to really help a community, they're getting the person to 300 followers, right? Especially if their event or their purpose, whatever it is that they're doing, is to change and transform lives. And all of those things come in due time when you're consistent with it.
So then, I know you said something about engagement in terms of putting out engaging content as well as engaging with others. But how do you then balance that with flooding people's like timelines and stuff? Like,
That's hard. And guess what? People gonna unfollow. And if they unfollow, okay, cool. You know what I mean? I think it's like when you're you authentically, if you're like, oh my gosh, I already post one, so I need to post again, post again. If you feel like you're led to post again, post again. If you want to post again because you feel like you want to post a picture of yourself and you want to post a picture of your thing, I say do it. Because even the people who unfollow you, if your page is public, they're going to find themselves right back on your page snooping around anyways. Like, we're really serious about that. Unfollowing isn't really a true unfollowing if your page is public. Now, if it's private, they have no access to it.
Right.
But if it's public, guess what? Even if they're like, oh, I'm tired of seeing his brand, let me unfollow. But if your engagement increases, guess what? You're on their, what is it called? The discovery, the explore page. They find themselves like accidentally on your page, like, did I follow this guy? So.
All right, so I appreciate that, and I'm sure the people listening who've been taking notes just got some free game there, like
free.
Yeah, so you see, remember consistency and engagement, and most importantly, discovering your why. Like, don't get into it for the wrong reasons because it's a lot of work. That I can attest to. It is a lot of work, especially if you don't have anyone that you're paying to do a lot of the work for you. Yeah, it is time consuming and apparently very financially consuming as well. Like, until you start getting paid for it.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break here and then we'll be right back.